Yeah, thank you very much, Tim, and everybody to be on the call. So we'll be talking about responding to nation state actors. And just to begin with, some viewer discretion before we dive in. This is just a quick disclaimer. The opinions we are sharing today are our own and don't necessarily reflect those of our employers. Definitely, between us, we have got many of years of experience. So I've been working in red teaming, VAPT, and offensive security kind of stuff. And with me, I'm joined with Cam, and Cam is more on the threat research side, and probably the proper blue team, you can say. So whatever we say here is not going to be everything that we suggest will be perfect fit for every environment. Think of this as insight and perspective, not a one size fit all playbook. So also you'll notice a few point. We'll inject some deliberate style to keep things light. Cybersecurity definitely can be a very heavy topic. So little humor helps us keep the energy up. When that happens, we'll make it clear. With that out the way, let's get started. So quickly going through the agenda, today's session start with an introduction to APT-38, which is a North Korean state-backed group that has turned cybercrime into state policy. We look at how their operations have stolen over 1.4 billion through sophisticated banking heists, showing the geopolitical stakes behind financial cyber attacks. From there, the plan is to shift to defense, starting with how anomaly-driven detections can help intercept business email compromise attempts that slip past probably traditional tools. We'll also explore the pyramid of pain framework that shows why targeting attacker tactics and tools create real friction. Rather than just blocking indicators, they can easily change. So, well, then cover the role of zero-day exploits, often million-dollar payloads that APT-38 and others use to gain initial access, and why rapid patching and layer defense are essential. Finally, we'll close with identity architecture because in today's threat landscape, protecting and monitoring identities is one of the most effective ways to stop attackers from moving laterally and turning intrusions into billion-dollar heists. So, quick introduction of APT-38 is just a refresher. It's a North Korean state-sponsored cyber group that shows how Pyongyang has transformed cyberspace into a weapon of state policy. Unlike many other nation-state actors that primarily pursue espionage, APT-38 is uniquely financially motivated, specializing in sophisticated attacks on banks and the global SWIFT network. The group has been linked to theft of more than 1.1 billion worldwide, making it one of the most successful state-backed financial cybercrime operations ever uncovered. So these attacks are not opportunistic but highly strategic, designed to evade international sanctions, generate hard currency, and directly fund the regime highest priorities, including its nuclear weapons and military programs. APT-38 illustrates how North Korea integrates cyber operations into its broader national strategy, using digital theft as economic lifeline and geopolitical lever. For financial institutions and global businesses, this represents more than just a fraud. It's a national security challenge where commercial networks becomes the battleground for state-sponsored operations. The overall group activity underscores a critical lesson for all of us that in the modern era, cybercrime is not just a criminal threat, but a geopolitical tool. And defending it against requires treating resilience as part of both economic security and global stability. To get more into deep dive and more the technical analysis, I leave the floor for Cam so you can walk us through the technicalities of the threat actor.
Cool. I'll just preface everyone by to say if Kamran's a public speaker and I'm not, so I'm hopefully going to be able to deliver this the same way Kamran did. So before we get started, I want to talk about the DOM. So I know I've put a piece about the DOM in here. I don't know how technical the group is here today, but the DPRK, this is basically about the Bybit attack. This is a $1.4 billion heist in one transaction that was stolen from the DPRK's APT-38. Now, I know everyone's probably seen a bit of this, but the actual through and through attack path is not that widely well known. It's kind of a bit of piecemeal everywhere. So obviously, they didn't use any crazy like zero-day chains. They relied on social engineering, and the DPRK's APT-38 does rely quite heavily on social engineering to accomplish their goals. A lot of what this attack relied on was a attacker posing as an open source contributor who ended up trying to trick the developer to install a malicious Docker package. And this Docker package was run at elevated privileges. Now, if you don't know, that gives the attacker access to the actual host itself, which they then used to exfiltrate AWS session tokens. And then from there, that token lived on for 20 days they'll probably outlive, the rest of us. But that's crazy for an admin, especially on a production environment where blockchain and stuff like that's so crucial. So I imagine they probably did some sort of refresh abuse on that token. I don't really know the ins and outs of that part. But then obviously from there, all they did was on the supply chain side, because this just wasn't attacked directly at Bybit, but it was on Safe Wallet's UI. So they manipulated a small piece of innocuous JavaScript, which was doing something in the UI. I don't really know what it was initially used for. Then they replaced it with one which only activated when a large transaction was initiated. So it was at the broadcast stage. And at that point, the transaction, even though it looked like to them on their UI, it was going to the legit places. So they signed the transaction and sent it. It was getting redirected to DPRK controlled wallets. Now, obviously, that's a crazy edge case, given that this is a supply chain attack, and all they did was modify this tiny bit of JavaScript. It's going to sound a little bit overwhelming if you haven't seen, I guess, the preface of the context of the actual incident. Now, the reason most of this happened was because of the fact that they were using a hardware wallet, but this hardware wallet doesn't support every kind of smart contract and transaction initiation, so it just couldn't parse it at all. So it didn't even try to parse it, so it errored out, and then the only place they could do it was on the UI. So critical to this attack is the fact that they gave up their critical security control, which was the hardware wallet, by trusting what was on screen, which can obviously be manipulated. That's basically a hot wallet at that point, a hot wallet which held $3 billion or something to that effect, which is a crazy amount to hold in one wallet anyway. So there's a couple of mitigations there, right? So start a debate with Kamran. I think we'll talk about the Web 2 side. So that's just the normal internet side, and then the Web 3 side as well, which is on the crypto side. So I think obviously the social engineering aspect is probably the craziest part about this. So they'd obviously had to, and obviously Kamran, chime in because you're the red teamer and you're more used to targeting people than me. But I gather this would be more personal than your typical spear phishing attacks where you're just looking at someone's work profile. How would they know to pose as that open source contributor to I guess lure that person who also had admin access by chance?
Yeah, I think that's really important as well. From the red team perspective, I think what I've been observing is the similar cases in the region as well, majorly on the supply chain security, where people have compromised either third party or a developer who was an open source contributor, and eventually that led to the compromise of the organization itself. But I think the bigger picture around that is the security, how the organization basically have a take on that. Rather than just focusing on the employees within the office, they have to focus in their personal lives as well. So I've been running phishing simulation campaigns for over 10 years now. And the thing which I try to teach people is what we are doing, and all the campaigns that we are doing internally is not just to prepare for your professional life, but also for your personal life as well. Because if you get compromised in your personal capacity, because this is what I've observed with most of the keyloggers on the dark web, people use their corporate credentials in their personal laptops as well. And they try, maybe it's just for emails, or maybe some shared drive, or maybe they just want to have some documents, or they're working on some government entity or something and they have to apply for a visa or something, but eventually the credentials gets compromised. So I think the take is more on the both sides, having passwordless kind of stuff in place for the employees, maybe with YubiKeys or something else. And also from the training perspective, we have to train them to be trained in their personal lives as well. So yeah, that's what I personally think as well.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's something we're doing as well. So obviously, these key people, like I said right at the start, obviously before all of this, with the targeting of the AI voice calls and stuff, that was a personal attack. And I think it's becoming more critical to support those devs at home. The YubiKey point's a good one, obviously, because FIDO2 is probably the best defense against a lot of the identity theft pieces. So the other piece in terms of the Web 2 is obviously I brought it up a minute ago, but with the stolen access tokens. So, I mean, 20 days for an admin account does seem excessive, right? Like obviously not on the part of Bybit, but on the part of Safe Wallet. It does seem excessive for a AWS session token, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think this is something which I've observed within the organization as well, that basic cybersecurity hygiene is not in place when it comes to cloud or even on-prem environment, because we are majorly on-prem, and that's what I've observed in the GCC as well. Things are moving on cloud, but they are pretty much hesitant with the security and that kind of things. So I've seen these things where people still use credentials. For example, if you take an example of DevOps repositories, maybe Azure DevOps, people are still, they just have full access. Even developers have full access, and they're giving access to everybody else. So eventually, it's not centralized, and that is one of the major problems in the banks and also the corporate environments. That people should be restricted with the least privilege at least, and then there should be a unit or department that should be looking after all the access privileges. And not only that, when we talk about the layer defense approach, I think that's quite similar. Starting, so it's two approaches: either you go from outside in or inside out, ingress or egress, and that completely depends on that as well. And eventually, you have to basically secure from the both sides as well. Recently, I've been doing some research as well on using like different tools which developers use on daily basis. So the idea for me was to basically find out the information, like how insiders can basically exfiltrate the data. So it's not simply we can put in words that only threat actors are trying to abuse the corporate environments, but also most of the time there are a lot of insiders, because threat actors have to spend a lot of time to understand your organization culture and also your assets and all that kind of stuff. But insiders already know the processes and the business processes. So I personally believe that when it comes to identity and access management or privilege access management or access tokens or authentication authorization, so we have to take account into both of the sides to make sure that we ensure the maximum security. And maximum security comes with the maximum visibility, and it only comes when you know your assets, and asset includes the people and the system they're using. So it's people, process, and technology.
Yeah, yeah, of course, absolutely, completely agree with that. Um, so I think, yeah, even though I think I want to cover over the fact that I've said, this is quite a crazy edge case the way the attack unfolded. The actual mitigations here, as we just discussed, are quite simple. In terms of the fact that, I mean, the session token, for one thing, 20 days of dwell time on this admin session token, either that's the refresh abuse or the persistence of lateral movement that was installed. That sort of thing should be detected in a corporate environment. So it's not like the actual mitigations will be any much more crazy than just normal security measures. So obviously, just cautious of time here. I want to jump right into the Web3 side. So at the time, and this is Kamran, if I'm wrong, obviously jump in on me. I think one of the things I really wanted to do was have like an agent-based or like a Chromium-based, like an extension in your browser that we could detect this DOM manipulation. So obviously at the time of the attack, like I said, it was dynamically loaded into the UI right before a large transaction and then immediately removed afterwards. So it's trying to remove traces of itself. Do you think an agent-based detection of this, and obviously this is quite abstract, or a Chromium extension could detect that and reliably roll that back? So you could use like a grease monkey or whatever it's called, like the CSS selector, where you could select those critical elements on like a page like Saifullah. Think that would work, or is it a bit crazy?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty cool way of doing that. I was trying to do some research around the same, and I feel like there are a number of organizations and some startups in that cybersecurity space where they're trying to make a browser-based security. Because if you talk about users or organization getting compromised, normally it's either via phishing via email, or it's like compromised credentials, or if that is something like water holding attacks or something like that, which is majorly on a browser based, maybe 0 days or supply chain security and all that kind of stuff. But the way I see it is basically, again, it's a shared responsibility matrix for the browser as well, because definitely the system is yours, so you're responsible for your security. While on the browser sides, the organization like Google and all that stuff, they're responsible for the browser security itself. But eventually, I think if we have something in place that can track things in real time, maybe when it comes to supply chain security and all this stuff, but there are going to be implications on that, because definitely you need no more RAM to process, or maybe more processes or something like that. Maybe the system should be good. But the way I think is, because we are transforming based on the technology, and we are bringing in the AI and agentic and RAG and all that kind of stuff. So there should be some ways to automate that while making it easy for the people to even use like outdated systems, for example, right? Because even in the corporate environments, we see a lot of outdated systems, but those are normally risk accepted by the management as well, because
Yeah.
the applications running on them or the people using it, or maybe the process that they support, they cannot be moved onto the latest versions. But the other implication is basically the vendors itself, like how good they are when it comes to the security and how good they really think that security should be part of their solutions as well. So I think from the Web3 side, having the browser-based extensions or something, maybe tomorrow we'll see maybe another full-fledged browser coming to place for just like security-centric browser for all the Web3, developers and the people who are using cryptocurrencies and all that kind of stuff, or maybe smart contracts. So yeah, I personally believe there is a way, and there is a gap in that area because not a lot of people are working in that side as well. So I think if we have something in place, that's definitely gonna help and support the people as well. So I concur your ideas on the same. Yeah.
I'll take that as a cautious acceptance of the idea because I appreciate it was an abstract question. It always it's something that I've been wanting to do, even though everybody else doesn't agree with me. So I appreciate that you've given me that. I think obviously the blind signing obviously was another key. Sorry, I'll go back before we go on. The DOM, if you don't already know, is document object model. It's basically how the browser renders most content on your screen. So manipulating that obviously leads to crazy stuff. I just wanted to point that out before we carry on. So in terms of the actual on the Web3 side with the actual wallet, so the blind signing, as I mentioned obviously already, it's when the ledger can't parse what the transaction is. So it's basically like an expensive USB dongle at that point. So it wasn't human readable. It just says error, plug into your computer, and then you have to go past that on Safe Wallet side. So I think that's kind of a crucial piece to this attack, and that's probably one of the worst parts of it because you shouldn't be blind signing anyway, and then blind signing away over $1 billion is, very much a gamble anyway. So yeah, I mean, do you agree with that? I kind of get the feeling that you're completely selling out your ledger at that point. It's like the key feature of a hardware wallet, right?
Yeah, agreed with that. And I think just to add one more point, because when we talk about security, we are mostly security guys, and we have students who are transitioning into security. It's again more on the awareness side, because majorly what we have observed in the cyberspace is more on the supply chain kind of attacks, and this is what nation states sponsored attacks have been doing as well, because it's difficult to find out. And if you compromise one organization, you eventually compromise all of their customers as well, because if you're not doing proper patch management and you're not validating the patches and the changes, it becomes very difficult. Again, I personally feel it's more responsibility of the vendors who own, or the developer who owns the code base, and but also it's the responsibility of the organization to validate those patches. Because if you're not doing so, then you're definitely leaving the door open for everybody else. And the second part of that is basically giving awareness to the people, because um, now we have Gen Zs as well, so it's easy for them to basically go over the technology and understand the technology maybe much more better than what we do, and maybe they know more than what we do because we just know maybe more cyber or maybe IT and all the kind of stuff. So I used to give an example for supply chain security. Like if you just go to a mart and buy a bucket of apples, if there is a one bad apple and you bring the entire bucket home, so eventually all of your apples go bad. So that's basic supply chain. So I think it's more on the awareness as well, and we have to build the society around the same, that the world is not the same anymore, and the things are changing at very fast pace. And if we don't cope up with that, it's not gonna be us. Recently, I've observed one of the fraud that happened. So some parents basically share their credentials with one of their kids, and they wanted to do just some transaction or something, and that kid just goes somewhere, use the card, and then just come back. So maybe he just need to buy some games or stuff, so he went in person to one of the marts, and eventually the person basically take out the picture of the credit card, and then they were able to make some transactions. So because the kids are not aware on the security implications, and also on the credit cards and debit cards, like all the information is already there. So I think that's one of the biggest problems as well. I see some of the startups moving away from hard coding the integers and all the numbers and everything on the cards as well. That's a good approach, but then that also becomes difficult when it comes to technology, because eventually if your app gets compromised, your phone gets compromised, you still get compromised. But when we talk about the risk-based approach, the probability is pretty low when you're more aware and you have security controls in place.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I completely agree with the phone being all your eggs in one basket piece. Obviously, it's got all your information. It's got your financial details at this point. I mean, there's nothing on that you don't have on your phone these days as a standard thing. So it's definitely a crazy watering hole. I will say that the obviously the Bybit piece with them having $3 billion in one wallet. I would bring that up for debate, but I can't imagine you're going to disagree with me. I think probably having 100 million on a wallet maybe isn't so bad. Like $3 billion or $1.5 billion or whatever the amount was is absolutely crazy, especially when they were going to blindside it away. Maybe that should have been done in chunks. So they had the multi-sig approach with the N of N signers on the transaction, but I don't think that really helps when it's blind sign anyway. It kind of feels like all theater at that point. But yeah, as long as we're happy, we can just chew through to the next slide if you want. Cool. Okay. So yeah, I wanted to go through this. I know this is going to annoy some people. With the pieces here, I think this is what I'm saying here, and I want to say it up front, actually. I'm not saying IOCs are useless. What I am saying is that IOCs were made yesterday, and anomalies are going to be what's happening today in your own environment. It's effectively the key takeaway of this slide. So don't be angry at me and unmute and start yelling because that'll make me sad. IOCs obviously have only been created because someone's been hit in the past, or either that or threat research teams created them. And if it's a threat research team, unless you're paying for like a crazy service with like 6 figures, like from CrowdStrike, and they're giving you their raw indicators, it's like 100K. Those indicators obviously are solid. They're a completely different class to what you'd find on a blog or an open source list. Those lists obviously have been trickled down, and they're probably old infrastructure, or they're crowdsourced from people who have literally already been hit. Those people are probably getting those indicators from anomaly rules. Now, anomaly rules are obviously using, I guess, like functions to detect what's your baseline in your environment. So if you baseline, say, BEC, in the case of BEC, one of the things that I do is use some statistical functions to basically measure the character overlaps on like suppliers that we use and vendors that we have and clients that we have. So I'll look for, say, like the domains that we communicate with. So we have at least 5 out and 5 inbound in the last 30 days. Anything that shows up that looks similar to that to a good degree, it'll flag up and we'll investigate that. This is what you would obviously call an anomaly, and you baseline that. And once you know who your good suppliers are, you can just watch for any impersonation of those suppliers by looking at the similarity scoring from your statistical functions. So obviously you prioritize on impact. A lot of these ones that you'll see using stuff like this and anomalies, especially in the case of BEC, are going to be marketing fluff. A lot of these companies have stuff like, let's say you've got like a marketing CRM called like Eagle. Some companies will have like eagle.com, and then they'll have like geteagle.com. And that's a legit thing because they have GetEagle just to send out marketing spam, even though eagle.com is also legit. So obviously some of them will be financial fraud. We've had a few. One of the key ones that we had was something called Dorda. So door, like a door, and then A on the end, Dorda. I don't remember exactly what it was, but we didn't ever like use them, so it's not obviously that crucial. But someone spun up infrastructure that was Dorda, but with 3 O's instead of 2. They copied their email signatures. They copied their website. It looked the exact same, but in their signature, they some reason used a legit Dorda domain. This is one of the ways we found this through having this kind of detection set. So yeah, I think the key piece here is the fact that I guess the IOCs are yesterday and the anomalies are what you're looking at for in the future. I mean, Kamran, I guess this question's for you in terms of, because you're red team and you say you do phishing simulations a lot. How often, I think we'll get onto it in the next slide, but how easy do you think it would be if you could bypass, an anomaly detection versus, an IOC detection? Let's say I had your domain in a list.
Yeah, I think it's pretty easy to be really honest. Most of the times, what I've observed in the market is majorly phishing simulations are conducted on traditional basis. Again, links, attachments, macros, and all that kind of stuff. But when we talk about bypassing the controls, for example, you have email gateways, or there is some sandbox environment or something. You remember there was a recent attack on there was a new phishing attack, and they used basically a Japanese word which looked like a slash. So eventually, this is something new, right? So most of the systems will never know about that, unless and until maybe there is some AI, which is maybe there is a model or there's something that has enough capability or understands the different implications and understanding the context, because we human beings, we are trying to find ways of bypassing systems when even the system is just trying to protect itself based on the signatures or the initial, you can say, um, the security controls in place. So I personally feel it's not that difficult to bypass, and I have not seen major of the email gateways not being bypassed. I think it's pretty easy, and we still do it. But eventually, the question that comes in is, do we really put pressure on the employees itself if they get phished, or is it something that has to be owned by the businesses? Because this is something, there was one discussion happening maybe a year ago or 2 years ago. I met someone in one of the conferences, and she was presenting, this was a panel discussion or something, and she was talking on the phishing and whether this should be owned by the employees or by the business itself. And she made a very wise point, because we will not be able to educate all the employees with all different technicalities of phishing and different ways of doing phishing. Like, we have progressive web application that can be used for phishing. We have this file jacking or download jacking. Mr. Docs is coming up with so many different techniques. And we see that threat research people, when they post something, maybe it's good for the people, but that's not as quickly picked up by the security organization as it should be. But threat actors are basically picking it up. But there's another way out for that as well. That is, we are not able to spread the awareness the way we should, and to a broader perspective and to a broader audience, and that's something we also lack. So just bringing in the context of the problems and the solutions, so we can open the forum for the questions at the end as well. So this is what I personally believe in. It's not easy to bypass anything. Eventually it's all human made or man made. So there's going to be ways of bypassing the security, and it's just a matter of time, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, so we don't know.
Yeah, nice one. I mean, I completely agree, and I think you have a good point about bypassing. But I think one of your points is obviously on the culture stuff. I think how much of this do you think is kind of ruined by toxic security culture versus that reinforcement culture?
I think it's really important, the way you change, because culture is the only thing that you can manage. And if you're not managing your culture properly, then definitely you'll get compromised. So culture comes from the ID side as well, from the operational perspective, and also from the business perspective. But eventually it's the employees who are managing the businesses and running the tools and technologies. So I personally believe we have to show them how things are done. And this is what I've been doing, and I've been trying to do in my professional career as well. The more you show the people, the more visibility they get. Back in my university, when I was studying, I used to have one of my teachers and professors. He used to tell me, like, you have to train your eyes. You don't have to memorize everything, right? So I just picked up that point. I'm like, okay, fine. So I don't have to make people memorize everything. Maybe I can just help them to make a psychological change, that just make sure that you understand what's happening. So whatever you see, you just like go back one step behind and you look at it again and you say, okay, fine, this is malicious. Because this is something that happened with me as well, for example. So I was just sitting in my room, and I ordered something, and then I received a phishing link. It was for one of the, for example, FedEx. And I just went on the website, and I was just about to fill my card details. So I'm a cybersecurity professional as well. This can happen to me as well. But I always do one thing whenever, maybe if I'm logging into Facebook or Gmail or anywhere, I try to go onto the website, but I just take like 5 seconds. I'm like, is this legitimate? I just go through ins and outs of that, and then I'll make the decision. Okay, fine, this is fine. Let's go ahead. So I think this way we can make the culture change, and culture change is really important when it comes to protecting the people as well as the businesses.
Yeah, yeah. I honestly think I get scammed for a cheap graphics card. To be honest, if it's Christmas and I want a new graphics card, I'm likely to be open to being scammed for that. To be honest, but I will say that with the business piece on the culture side, I think it's nobody really thinks about it this way. But if you're if you're getting a phone call from you, like say a senior manager in your company, and you're in IT support and you're in help desk, and you get a call and he's begging you to reset the password without following process. If you're not empowered to say no, then you don't really have a good security culture, because you're in that toxic culture where someone can force you into doing something. And I will insinuate that a lot of, I think the people that are getting targeted by Scat Spider, and if they have been majorly destroyed by Scat Spider, I think could benefit from boosting their security culture, because it's obviously a lot of what they do starts with the help desk. They start at the help desk, they get a password, and they get a reset account for an admin, and then they're in. So security training piece and also the security culture in terms of being empowered to say no, even if it's the CEO. That's something that obviously we have. I would never, give that up.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to when we were talking on the same, so for employers, we might not have to enforce a lot of things, but there are some departments, for example, IT, or sometimes you have DevSecOps guys who have access to build servers, some guys who are managing secrets, and also the people in IT, maybe IT service desk or help desk. Those people have access to Active Directory and the environment, and they can reset the passwords. And maybe when it comes to cloud, they do the same thing. But I think that's where more enforcement has to be in place.
Yeah,
You have to make clear what the legal implications are and what can go wrong, because if people don't know what's going to happen wrong to them, if they do something wrong, they will never do something right? They will always try to find ways on bypassing the security controls that are already in place. So I think this is really important for the organization, and this is something people have been doing and some people miss. But whenever I talk to people, I do mention this, that this is something that has to be changed, because the security is moving in a very fast pace, and threat actors are moving maybe 100x more than the security as we do. So we have to be upfront, but that's the only way, is to make a culture change, is basically to make the behavior change, because behaviors makes the culture. So I think that's one of the biggest approaches as well.
absolutely. Look, I realize we're Kamran. We've run out of time, to be honest. But I think we need to steamroll the next few slides and just kind of try to loop them back in with what we've already been over.
Yeah, so I'll just quickly go through this one. So this is the pyramid of pain. It looks like a kid's food pyramid, but instead of carbs at the bottom, it's hashes. So starting down here, hash values, definitely one byte a change, new hash. Congrats, you have just wasted your life copying blog posts. Adversaries don't even break a sweat. And the next level is IP risks, which is pretty easy. You can block an IP. Meanwhile, the adversary can spin up 50 more of them in time to. And basically, the more time you take to write a firewall rule, they have 50 more IP addresses. So it becomes difficult. And it might not be malicious itself. Maybe it has been just tagged as malicious, but this is some other organization which is using it. And this has happened with Microsoft multiple times. And cloud credits are cheap, to be really honest. So nation states basically have infinite of them. Moving forward, we have domain names. Same deal, literally meal deal money on Namecheap, and they're back in the business. So again, if your reduction strategy starts and ends here, you're playing whack-a-mole on nightmare mode. And after this one, it basically starts to sting, because network and host, which is like registry keys, mutexes, file paths, weird processes names, it's doable to change, but not instant, because it means pushing new builds, testing compatibility, some operator retraining, annoying. Definitely, it's annoying for everybody, even for us as red teamers, but still achievable for a determined adversary. And moving up is basically tools. So this is where you start hunting them and hurting them, because this is more of the threat hunting kind of space as well. And tools are their comfort blanket, to be really honest. They know their infrastructure, they know their C2s, they know their custom malware loaders, maybe their favorite PowerShell one-liners for AMSI bypass and all that kind of stuff. If you rip those away, and now they've got to burn the development cycles, because they have to do QA, they have to retrain operations, they have to build new infrastructure, and tools aren't replaced overnight. And finally, when we go onto the top of the pyramid of pain, we get the TTPs, which is the tactics, techniques, and procedures. And we just simply cannot control H and find and replace those, because it's very difficult in doing so, because that's a full-fledged operation. So it's how their operators are trained, how their playbooks are built. If we change that, we are eventually forcing them to retrain, change their tooling, change their rebuilds, their whole workflows are rewritten, because they have to, because they have been caught. So that's actually a cost to the adversary. And eventually, when we surpass this pyramid of pain, it becomes behaviors. So humans are creature of habit. Like APTs groups leave fingerprints in how they work, like how they stage, how they fish, how they move sideways. Once they're in, you start detecting that. That's when you actually make them sweat. So here's the punchline. The bottom of this pyramid, as Cam has mentioned, that's yesterday's IOCs. We are not against it, but this is the bitter truth. And you are just chasing shadows of yesterday, or more likely last week. The top, though, that's where you get ahead. Focus on behaviors, anomalies, your business specific risk patterns. Otherwise, you'll just the cat in the arcade, whacking moles while the adversary already in the prize cabinet, loading up on your tokens. So the summary of the overall is basically to understand who is a threat actor, and it's more on the geopolitics and regional based as well. So we have to understand like who is trying to attack us. Like if there is another bank or if there's another telco organization or a healthcare sector, if they are getting compromised, probability is you will get compromised as well. Because most of the times we forget that we have links. Most of the times the banks have links with the insurance organizations, government entities, and all those others. Imagine if that organization gets compromised, it might lead you to get compromised as well. And on the flip side, if you get compromised, the other organization can also get compromised. So it's more of threat hunting, as we are saying. It's again one of the cultures we have to change in the market to proactively threat hunt and just make sure that we are much more aware of our organizations, our infrastructure, so we can make them more secure. You're on mute.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say, sorry, I think it's probably best we skip the 0 day slide due to time.
All right. Yeah, so identity architecture, Cam.
Yeah, cool. So I think this is what we were talking about earlier in terms of the identity first architecture model. So a lot of what this accomplishes is scalability versus just having your on-prem firewalls and everything kind of managed by yourself and you're managing your own patches. In identity first architecture, what you're aiming to do is build it in such a way where your only like ingress point is the IDP gateway. Everything else is bolted behind ZTNA and inside your corporate environment, and it's inside the trust boundary that is managed by that IaaS vendor or PaaS vendor or SaaS vendor. So what you do is the best thing to do is if you outsource this to like a vendor that hosts say Azure or AWS, and you host all of your stuff within that boundary, and then you enforce very strong identity controls, and then you kind of build that network out with ZTNA, which is a zero trust network access tunnel. You can build it so that people only have access to what they're put into RBACs have access to. So if you see this on the left-hand side, this is the standard access path. Normal users will sign in, they'll have SSO, they'll have conditional access policies, which might be additional valuation checks on the device. It might be location checks, it could be MFA, it could be really anything. So that's standard SSO, and that goes to your RBAC, which is obviously your roles and who has access to what applications. So if you're in finance, obviously you have access to say zero. But whereas if you're in security team, you might have access to different document sites. And then you move over here. This is the privileged access side. This might be this might include additional authentication steps just in time, which means you stand up access for a period of time when you request it. I think the key thing here is as well is the infrastructure as code. So infrastructure as code is obviously immutable infrastructure. So when you go to change the infrastructure, you push a change. And then you wait for a colleague to kind of approve that. And that doesn't go through until somebody else reviews the code that you're trying to push into production and change it and modify the infrastructure. The exception to that rule should be that for emergencies, you have that session recording, which pushes you through an isolated browser that obviously records that session, keystroke, etc. Because you don't really want, in a major production environment, you don't really want to have people having direct shell access in your environment. Whereas with this IAC and with Terraform and such, you have that 4-eye review process, which is clear for everyone to see what the code is that you're putting into production. So you have this kind of segregated, like immutable infrastructure, whereas on the left-hand side you have that identity gateway. So nothing here with these two lines. You can see both are blocked from the internet. The only gateway is your identity provider, which you aim to make as secure as possible with amazing evaluation checks. Cam, have you got any points to follow up on that?
Yeah, pretty much covered. So I think just the course of time, we'll just move on to the key takeaways. So the first thing is know your asset. Assets is going to be your ID asset as well as your people. Fix your culture. That's really important as well. Identity access management is the key, and IAM includes the PAM and all those other things. Passwords are sad ritual, sadly, and we see that also the banks are moving away from SMS and OTPs and all that kind of stuff. They're moving into some better alternates as well. We have to focus on architecture and detection efforts in the right places, because if you're not looking in the right places, we might leave ways for threat actors to compromise the organization. And that is one of the ways. And right places not just mean threat actors, but also your employees as well. And as we both have mentioned, IOCs are from yesterday's, indicator of attacks, we call them anomalies, are from today. So we have to focus more on them. It's more on having a normalized behavior of your organizations and comparing that with the abnormal behavior of the organization. So AI plays a really important role, and I think everybody is moving in that space as well. So this becomes more fast paced as compared to previous times, which is more delayed, and it takes a lot of other time as well. And lastly, as we will all agree as well, either you stay ahead or remain behind to get compromised. And most of the times, I talk to people and they say, we never got compromised. But 99% of the time you are not compromised, but 1% of the time is you are compromised, but maybe you don't know. So that's the key takeaways. So I'll leave for the Q&A session. If there are any, Chem, if we have time, we can. Else, just a thank you.